Hello and bonjour, this is Sarah Bokhari and you're watching Power Dilemmas here at TAG TV. The Ontario Liberals' 2018 budget contains few new spending surprises following more than a week of major announcements from Premier Kathleen Wayne, who is preparing for an uphill battle in a provincial election that is just weeks away. Universal prescription drug coverage for people over 65, a new drug and dental program, expanded access to free tuition for college and university students, and additional benefits for seniors are among some of the new promises in the provincial budget aimed at voters' wallets. The $158.5 million budget, which effectively functions as an election document this year, contained new details on spending announcements like free preschool childcare, increases in funding for healthcare and mental health, all aimed at winning over voters amid Wayne's declining approval ratings. The newly announced drug and dental program would reimburse Ontarians up to 80% of prescriptions and dental visits. The program will only apply to those who aren't already covered by workplace or other government benefits and is expected to cost $800 million over 2 years. To talk about the Liberal budget, we have with us our regular speaker, Mr. Jamie Allerton, who is a communication consultant with Conaptus. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
I'm good, Sarah. How are you?
Okay, so the Liberals have already raised the minimum wage to $14 in Ontario. Why the Conservatives think it's not a good idea for the economy?
Well, I think what you've seen from the business community, and particularly small businesses, which number in the thousands all across the province, is that when you are essentially increasing their labor costs by 25% overnight, it's just not sustainable, and it's a really hard hit for businesses to have to keep up with. So what Conservatives and business groups at large have had said that, yes, we notionally are in favor of a $15 minimum wage, but that it needs to be implemented over time so that businesses can adjust to their business planning and their costs, certainty and predictability to be able to absorb these new costs imposed by them by government.
So, having said that, do you think when progressive conservative candidates are knocking doors and they are talking about their, good points about the progressive conservative plans, do you think the people are going to accept the idea that $14 is not a good minimum wage?
I think what people across the province will know that if you look at how taxes have gone up under this government, they've also increased backdoor taxes through things like cap and trade that are now buried on your natural gas bill as we look at another cold day here in April here in the Greater Toronto area. They look at the cost of hydro, which has gone up and will continue to go up, and a government that continues to run deficit after deficit. They finally, if you believe their numbers, balanced the books this past year through some one-time revenue-generating things through the sale of Hydro One, but they're plunging themselves back into a deficit again this year with no immediate path back to balance. And sooner or later, there's going to be a reckoning. Ontarians, the government will have to pay for all this debt. They've more than doubled it over the course of their 15 years in office, and they continue to add to it. And people will kind of throw out the argument, well, of course, Ontario is a rich place, and that we can afford to take out a mortgage to kind of pay for some of these programs today. But the reality is this is a government that continues to essentially remortgage the house every single year and is never paying down the principal. And so when you look at how kind of that has an impact on the long-term effect of the Ontario economy, one, the higher taxation level, it drives up and drives away business investment into the Ontario economy. Two, it also has an effect of making the cost of borrowing that much higher. Ontario's already experienced a couple credit rating downgrades, which means it costs more to borrow money. And as it stands today, interest is already the third largest expenditure on the provincial balance sheet every single year. So after healthcare and after education, the province spends the most on interest payments rather than anything else. And ultimately, that's just not sustainable in the long term.
So, Jamie, you've mentioned about the debt. how much debt the Ontarians are facing now after the announcement of the latest Liberal budget?
I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it's now well over $300 billion.
Okay. Okay, let's take you to childcare. While childcare is free in many European countries, Ontario would be the first province in Canada to offer the service for free if Liberals win in the June 7 election. How do you see the step by the Liberals?
Well, I think of it as just kind of a really cynical attempt by the Liberal government to continue to try and buy votes. Here is a premier who is the most unpopular premier in all of Canada with approval rating down in the teens. That means Kathleen Wynne is less popular in Ontario than Donald Trump is, and there's a man who's known to be unpopular and faces a ton of controversy. And whether it's any of these individual initiatives that the Kathleen Liberals are announcing and presenting as new policy, you can have a debate over the merits and what's best and what taxation level should be at in society. But for a government that's been in power for 15 years and made very little progress on these issues, to all of a sudden on the eve of an election to be rolling all these out, I think it's just really cynical, and I think it speaks to the desperation that the Liberal Party faces today.
So you do believe it's step in desperation and face saving?
I think most definitely it's desperation and face saving here. The government has already tried to bail themselves out with the electorate by lowering their hydro rates, and all they did to lower the hydro rates is shift that burden onto the taxpayers, and taxpayers ultimately still pay that debt for running deficits. And so this is a government that's just kind of out of gas and out of ideas. We've seen several senior ministers under the both McGuinty and Wynne governments announce that they will not be running again, and there's kind of been a lack of real kind of star power of new candidates and new lifeblood coming to the Liberal Party. So this is a party that's tired and out of gas, and unfortunately we're just seeing cynical last-ditch election promises to try and win re-election in June.
So a lot of Ontarians are believing that Liberals are suddenly taking care of the province. What if, like, God forbid, if we get to Liberals again, how many taxes are we expecting from them?
I think that remains to be seen. The government and the Liberal Party is obviously not going to campaign on raising taxes, but they've done that multiple times since coming to office back in 2003. And I think that if you look at the issues of affordability and the kind of general sentiment amongst the Ontario electorate that things just aren't working right now and that there's time for a change, I don't think people are going to trust Kathleen Wynne to be the one to implement that change when her government and her predecessor, Premier McGuinty, are ultimately responsible for a lot of where Ontario stands today. So in terms of taxation levels and what they're going to do, we saw that they increased taxes on middle class and upper middle class families in the most recent budget. It didn't get too much attention, but that's several more $100 that are going to be coming out of their pockets every single year for each individual earner. And ultimately where that goes long term, who knows? But we also compare the tax rates here now into what's gone on with the tax cuts in the U.S. We saw the CEO of RBC today saying that the flight of capital and investment in business in Ontario is already starting to leave as a result of tax competitiveness issues. And if you look at what federal government is doing under Prime Minister Trudeau and the kind of signaling that what Premier Wynne is doing, it's just Ontario's not going to be competitive. And Ontario is not an island. Ontario has a very integrated economy with NAFTA and with the United States. We're a trading nation and we're a trading province. And if people have to pay too much taxes here and the costs for things like healthcare and the costs for things like hydro are just too high, then people can go business and their money can go elsewhere, and that ultimately hurts Ontarians the most.
So having said that, one last question. What is the best selling point for Doug Ford's PC party to win the June 7 election?
I think the best thing that the Ontario PC Party can do, led by Doug Ford, is to continue to highlight the mismanagement and corruption of the Liberals after 15 years in government and put forth a positive vision as to how they are going to get the province back on track and bring back hope and opportunity. I think yes, the Ontario economy is growing, if you look at the numbers province-wide, but a lot of that's really concentrated in Toronto itself. And it's not being felt in outer parts of the GTA. It's not being felt in Niagara and in southwestern Ontario, where those economies never really recovered after the global recession in 2008. So I think the more Doug Ford and the Ontario PC Party can be looking to show that it is indeed time for change, and then when be focusing attention on where the Liberals are most vulnerable, while putting things in the window that demonstrate how a Doug Ford administration or a Doug Ford government leading the Ontario PC Party caucus into a new legislature, into a new government, what their, say, top 3 to 5 priorities will be, it will win the confidence of Ontarians and ultimately, hopefully, choose change in June.
Okay, wonderful. Jamie, thank you so much for participating in my TV show. Talk to you later.
Take care.
So we are talking about the latest Liberal budget 2018, and we have Mr. Ari Laskin, who is a political consultant with the Capitol Hill Group. Welcome to my show, Ari.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. So the Liberals have already raised the minimum wage to 14 in Ontario. Why the Conservatives think it's not a good idea for the economy, Ari?
Well, it's quite simple. To go and raise the minimum wage at the rate that the Liberal government has done so right now is not only too quick to do so, but it doesn't allow for small businesses, who are the people that are going to be most affected and impacted by this, to sort of adjust their business practices to accommodate for that increase. We've already seen that bigger corporations like Loblaws or like, well, pretty much any of the grocery stores have already started to automate and put in self-checkouts. So these are the jobs that would have gone to the minimum wage earners. The issue that we've seen so far is these small businesses simply don't have the resources to go and set up automation, don't have the funds or the resources to go ahead and increase the minimum wage, and as a result they're having to lay off employees, reduce hours, or significantly increase their rates.
So when the Progressive Conservative candidates are door knocking, and how are they going to react to the raise in the minimum wage if they get a voter which is in favor of this?
Well, that's really going to be up to the individual candidate, how they want to react. And I can't speak for each of the candidates, but if I were to be going to the door and I had somebody that was arguing with me that the increase in the minimum wage was the right way to go, I might be inclined to say, you know, you're absolutely right. It is the right way to go. But we can't go about it at a ad hoc basis and a haphazard basis without actually looking at the full impact and how this is going to resonate with the small business owners. So I do agree that having a minimum wage being increased, but I don't agree with the speed and the rate at which it is being increased.
Okay. So Ari, let's talk about childcare. While childcare is free in many European countries, Ontario would be the first province in Canada to offer the service for free if Liberals get it in June. How do you see the step by the Liberals, Ari?
Well, I just want to correct one thing or clarify something right from the outset. This is not a free service. This is going to cost a couple $100 million in terms of how it's going to be paid. So this is ultimately going to come down to the taxpayer is going to have to pay for it. So whether the person has the means to support childcare on their own or not, they're going to be paying for this as well. I think something that's very something that should have been done by the government is a means testing. If you have the means to pay for childcare, then why are we paying for childcare for you? Why are we not helping out those people that actually need this service? So to go and put a blanket statement out there and says, well, we're going to have free childcare for everybody, to me is nothing more than a election promise, and one that I honestly can't see it being delivered properly.
So you just mentioned election promises. Why are Liberals making all these promises before elections? Would they deliver this time?
Well, if you ask me, I don't think so. I don't think that they will deliver this time. I think this is something that we've seen for the past 15 years that come when rubber hits the road and the Liberals are looking at possibly losing government. They're going to promise the moon and back and try to give everybody everything without really delivering. Now, I believe in the last election we were looking at a revamping of the auto insurance for all of Ontario. I haven't seen anything with that. We were looking at reducing the debt retirement costs on our hydro bills. I haven't seen any changes in that. These were all election promises that were made in the last election campaign, and these are the same election promises that are being made now. Ontarians aren't stupid. We're a very smart and educated province, and I don't think that they're going to fall for this again.
So, you know, this sudden caring attitude in the Liberal government is could just be termed as election promises.
Well, they had 15 years to care. What's happened now?
So, okay, so how many taxes are we looking at if, God forbid, we get Liberals again?
Well, in terms of the tax, well, we're going to have a carbon tax that's going to be introduced, because you're not going to have the provincial Liberals are not going to oppose the federally imposed carbon tax. I know that the progressive Conservatives have been very adamant and vocal, saying that they will be opposing this and using whatever legal means they can to do so. You're going to be seeing an increase in a number of other taxes in order to pay for these promises, in order to pay for the OHIP Plus for 65 years and older, in order to pay for the childcare that the government has been touting as free services. These are $500 million for the OHIP Plus for 65 plus, a couple $100 million more for childcare. I don't know, but strikes me as you're going to see an increase in your income taxes. You're going to see an increase in a number of other user fees. Wouldn't surprise me if the municipalities decide to pile on as well and increase taxes on municipal expenses.
Okay, Ari, one last question. What is a good argument for Doug Ford's PC party to win the June 7 provincial election?
Are you better off now with Kathleen Wynne for the past 15 years, or is it time for a change? And my honest opinion is I don't think that Ontario is better off now. I think that we're much worse off. We have the highest debt for any subnational jurisdiction in North America. We have more debt now than California, which is ridiculous considering the population of California versus the population of Ontario. I think that the question really is, are you better off with the Liberals, or is it time for a change? And the answer, in my opinion, is it's time for a change. And Doug is the person that I believe is the one to bring that change about.
I hope Ontario sees the best change come June 7th. Thank you very much, Ari, for your time today. And that was Mr. Ari Laskin. He is a political consultant with Capitol Hill Group. With this, we're going to take a short break. Thank you.
If you need to protect your family or business with life and health insurance, save for your retirement and children's education, or need mortgage advice, we can help. To set up your complimentary meeting, call Zahid Sayed at 905-624-0008 or visit urujfinancial.com.
Pabst Promo has become the largest suppliers of promotional products in Canada. If you're looking to get your business to the next level, then look no further and call 416-710-6777 or visit pabstpromo.com. Products we provide with your logo, teardrop flags, tents and banners, t-shirts and golf shirts with logo, pens, air fresheners and keychains.
Welcome back to Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bokhari here at TAG TV. According to CBC News, there are Toronto Police Services officers who want to march in the Pride Parade. The officer, who serves as the force's Lgbt liaison, says the Toronto Police Service will keep working to improve its relationship with the gay community. Pride Toronto and Chief Mark Saunders agreed uniformed officers wouldn't march in this year's parade, a demand made by Black Lives Matter Toronto during a demonstration that brought last year's event to a standstill. That group and others say the presence of armed forces is intimidating for some people taking part in the annual festivities. The controversial decision means that for the first time since 2000, police officers won't make the turn from Bloor Street onto Yonge, which is overwhelming for a few people. Officers can march in the parade without their uniforms. The force will, of course, provide security for the major downtown event, which begins very soon. Today, we are going to talk about this latest controversy between Pride Parade and Toronto Police Services. To talk about this, we have Mr. Eric Lorenzen. He is a Vice President Communication, Lgbt Tory Canada. Welcome to my show, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
So, Eric, why is police not allowed to march in this year's Pride Parade?
Well, this has been an ongoing controversy since over a year ago. Of course, there was a problem with the police presence in Toronto Pride and other Pride festivals in Canada, to be honest, brought to light by Black Lives Matter. And their issue was that the presence of police was threatening to members of minority communities, that the police were targeting minority communities, and therefore they shouldn't be present at the parade. So this year, though, there's an added layer of controversy because of the arrest of Bruce McArthur, who has been accused of serial killings of gay men in the village, and the police, the Toronto Gay Village, and the police have been criticized for not acting sooner on evidence that there was a serial killer targeting gay men in the community. So there's that added level this year.
Okay. So, okay, first of all, our viewers would like to know, when is the Pride Parade again?
It's at the end of June. I've forgotten the exact date, but it's the last weekend in June.
Okay, so Pride Parade is the last weekend in June. Let's continue with our interview, Eric. Do you think Pride is political, as someone referred?
Yeah, I think Pride has always been political. The very first Pride Parade in Toronto was in the 1980s, and it was a protest against the treatment of the gay community by the Toronto police. So yeah, the very origins of Pride in Toronto and elsewhere are rooted in politics. It's always been political from the beginning. It's only sort of evolved relatively recently into more of a celebration and a festival, but the origins of Pride have always been political. So it's not surprising that political issues are raised around this event.
Okay, so Eric, a rainbow flag is flying at police headquarters. What is your say on it?
I think it's great. I think it's a sign of progress. I think the Toronto police and other police forces around the world are making huge efforts to reach out to the LGBT community. And I think they're sincere about that because times have changed. And so I think that kind of gesture from police forces should be welcomed, and it's an encouraging sign of progress when we see things like that.
Okay, so Eric, last year Saunders, the police chief who also attends the parade, apologized for the 1981 bathhouse raids. Our viewers would like to know, what was the 1981 bathhouse raid?
Well, in the 70s and early 80s, in Toronto's Gay Village, there were a lot of gay bars and bathhouses that were targeted by the police. They were routinely raided, and mostly gay men, but lesbians were also targeted. These premises were raided. The people inside were arrested and charged with gross indecency and other criminal offenses. Their identities were released to the press, and it was basically an attempt by the police and the city of Toronto to clamp down on LGBT people in the city. So the police routinely raided gay bars and bathhouses in Toronto's Gay Village. In 1981, they raided a bathhouse in Toronto, and the gay community finally decided they'd had enough. So there was a riot a few days later after the raids. The police put down the riot rather brutally and arrested a lot of the rioters. But it was the beginning of the sort of gay rights movement in Toronto. And the following summer was the first Pride Parade in Toronto. And the first Pride Parade in Toronto was a response to the heavy-handed brutality from the Toronto Police Force targeting the gay community during the bathhouse raids.
Okay, so you are the Communications Vice President with Lgbt Tory.
Yes.
The understanding is that Conservatives are not very inclusive to our LGBTQ2 brothers and sisters. So let's elaborate on that.
Okay. I think that's an unfair characterization. I think, yes, the Conservative Party and all political parties, for that matter, have a history of anti-LGBT policies. It wasn't that long ago, 1999, that all of the major federal political parties voted against a proposal in Parliament to legalize gay marriage. That was including the Liberals and the NDP. The Prime Minister at the time, Jean Chrétien, voted against it. So it's not just the Conservative Party. All the federal political parties have a history of anti-LGBT policies. Now, to be fair, the Conservative parties are the last ones to sort of arrive at the table, so to speak. But it's been my experience, and I'm very active in both the federal and the provincial Conservative parties here in Ontario, both at the riding level and at the national level. And it's been my experience that that's not the case anymore. I'm openly gay. Everybody I work with in the party knows I'm gay, and with very few exceptions, I've been welcomed with open arms in the party, and I've been encouraged to be an active party member, and I have had hardly any negative repercussions. So I think the times have changed. Okay. That's an unfair and outdated stereotype, in my opinion.
Okay, I would like to congratulate on your hard work, Eric. How can we make on spaces in Ontario more inclusive for our LGBTQ minority communities?
I think we have to. There's a couple of things we can do. I think, first of all the Conservative political parties, federal and provincial, can make an effort to recruit LGBT Conservatives to be active in the party, to run as candidates in elections, to work on their local riding associations. There are lots of LGBT Conservatives. I run into them all the time, and that's what our organization is all about. And the parties should encourage those people to be more active and more visible in the party, and start recruiting people to take high-level positions. Also, I think symbolic gestures from politicians go a long way to signaling that the parties are welcoming to LGBT people. So that means marching in pride parades, participating in Pride Festival events. Although those gestures are symbolic, those symbols are important to the LGBT community, and the party should step up and participate.
Okay, Eric, it was very good to hear from you. We will talk to you next time. Thank you. Again, I would like to congratulate on your hard work for the LGBTQ community.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And that was all, viewers, from Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bokhari today. Ontario is your province. Your vote is a very sacred instrument you can use in this democratic country. With this thought, we will see you again. Ciao.